Hey everyone, and welcome to the tutorial series for the NPC Manager system. In this video, we'll see how we can add our own custom logic to our NPCs. Now this is a more advanced topic, which is why this is the last tutorial in the series. And the idea came after having some discussions with some folks on our Discord, and I thought this would be a fun tutorial to show you guys how you can add your own custom logic to fit the NPC Manager to your own project. So if you're watching this video, I hope that you've watched all of the previous ones so you understand how the NPC Manager works and all the systems, because we're going to be assuming that you know that, and we're going to go straight to the custom logic portion of it. So our goal for today is going to be to show you how to create a custom task and how to create a way to dynamically change the custom task order. And we're going to actually do something a little different today. I've created a sample scene. So I want to first show you guys what we'll be creating, the entire final result. I'll explain what we're seeing, and then I'm going to delete all of the custom code, and we're going to do it step by step. So the first thing I'll do is I'm just going to go ahead and click play here. And we see that we have Bob, our friendly NPC, and he is simply roaming around this random volume. And you can see here, if you look at the tasks time, that it just ended and it restarted again. When he goes to the next location, it restarts again, and this task is basically 10 seconds. So he is basically going through task index 0, which is the first task on the profile, and he's going to be executing this task indefinitely on a loop. All he's doing is roaming around. And now what I'll do is I'm going to step on this little trigger here, and notice that we have this secret entrance revealed into this supposed cave, and Bob is now walking inside the cave, and notice that we have task index 1. So this blueprint not only opened this door, but contacted Bob and told him that he now needs to execute task 1. And now Bob is executing a custom task, which told him to go straight to that location, which is in front of that very not so subtle secret door. And he's now checking the distance between himself and the player. And only when the player gets nearby, Bob opens the door and very graciously disappears himself, destroys himself because it's no longer useful. And now we can walk in here and get our nice little secret, which is just a random coin. Very simple scenario, but this shows you guys how you can add your own logic inside the NPC Manager, and how we can change the order of the task and actually create something a little bit more relevant to gameplay, as opposed to what you see on the showcase level, which is just, the NPCs rotating, right? It's very simple. So very well. So that's what we're going to be creating today. So we are going to delete Bob. Let's see, change task custom logic. Yep, we're going to go ahead and delete that. And we have this special blueprint here, which we are going to edit. And I'm going to delete this right here because I want to rewrite that again from the very beginning. And here under this folder, which I already made, I'm going to delete. Well, let's just save the level first. And then I'm going to delete him. And memory reference, that's fine. It's going to close all my windows. And lastly, I'm going to go back and delete my custom logic profile. We're going to recreate all of this from scratch. The only thing I do not want to delete is the controller. I'm actually going to open, and we're going to be recreating all of this from scratch. I'm going to move it to my second screen here, and the reason for that is I want to keep the video short. We don't want to spend any time debugging. The point of the video is to show you the steps, not really the result, because you guys will be writing whatever you want. So, all right. So if we go back to our PowerPoint here, the first thing we'll do is we need to create a custom NPC in a custom NPC controller. That's the very first thing. And every time you want to add a custom task, you need to create a child blueprint of the base NPC controller component here. Also, if you want to control the order of the tasks of a profile, you also need to create a custom NPC controller. So for either case, we're going to create a child controller here of this class. So right click and create child blueprint class. And we're going to call it NPC controller underscore custom logic, because why not? And we're going to move this guy on the new folder called custom logic. Just move it there for now. We have nothing here. Now let's create our custom NPC. And typically, what I would recommend normally is for you to create a child blueprint of BP NPC. But in this case, we're just going to duplicate BP NPC. And we're going to say BP NPC underscore custom logic. And we're going to move this guy to his folder, custom logic. Now you may be wondering, why did we duplicate him instead of create a child? The reason for that is if I open our custom NPC, which is basically what we're going to be using, we have the ability now to remove this component and add our custom component. If we create a child, this is going to be inherited, meaning we cannot change it. That's the reason we want to duplicate them, right? So right now we're going to, instead of using the NPC controller, we're going to delete this guy. And we're going to add NPC controller. And remember that we named it custom logic. Make sure that you add the right one here. Compile and save. And if you select him, it's exactly the same as the regular controller, obviously because it's a child. So what we're going to do is we're going to add additional code here. But for now, let's go to general settings. Let's give him his proper name, Bob. And we want to go to the debug options. And we want to debug the routine because we want to make sure that we understand what's happening as we're writing the code. And then we can grab our custom logic NPC and we can drop him here. And obviously nothing's going to happen right now because we need to give him a profile. So that is the next step, is to create a custom profile. And we go to Blueprints, Profiles, Base Class. And under this blueprint, we're going to create a child blueprint. And we're going to rename this Profile underscore Custom Logic. And I'm going to move this to the top folder. That's just my preference. I like to keep things organized. And we're going to open Custom Logic. And right now, there is basically nothing, right? So let's go back to our NPC, click on our special controller, go under Profile, Profile List, and we are going to add Custom Logic, right? Make sure that you have the exact name here, Custom Logic, Custom Logic. And let's just make sure that things are working. The first thing we want to do is for the very first task, which is index 0, we are going to use a standard task. And we're going to say, hey, the standard task is going to be roam nearby bounds. That's it. And we can, again, give this a duration of 10 seconds. It doesn't really matter, but let's just make it 10 seconds for now. And if we click Save, the last thing we want to do is we want to give this NPC a reference to the NPC manager. You should have one of those on your scene or things are not going to work. And I think we're good to go. So let's see what happens. If we click Play, we see that Bob, we renamed him Bob, is now roaming around randomly inside this volume. And because he only has one task, nothing is really happening, right? He's just going to loop there forever. That's fine. Everything is working correctly right now. And if I step here on this blueprint, all we've done right now is just open this door because we haven't added the code to change the task for Bob. Great. So I think that's great. So now what we need to do is to add the ability for Bob to receive a task index, because basically what's happening is, let's actually go to the profile, custom logic, and we're going to add our next task. Click on the plus sign here, and this one is going to be under task mode, custom task. And then we have one value that we can control when we select the custom task, and that is a custom task index. And the reason for that is because there's going to be a specific event that will be called when the task is custom, and it'll pass the ID, or the index rather. So you can have more than one custom task on your profile, and if you were to create another one, make sure that you change the task ID here, so then your NPC knows exactly which custom task is being called. Otherwise, if you forget to change this, it will always call custom task 0. Okay? So we'll do that. And the other thing we want to do is under task order, we don't want it sequential or random, we want it custom. We want to explicitly tell the NPC to use a custom order. And what he's going to do is he's going to use a special function that returns the task index, and we're going to override that function and basically return the index that we want with our own logic. I know it sounds a little complicated, but it's really not. So hopefully you can bear with me here. All right, let's go back to the NPC folder here, and we have our custom logic, and let's open our custom logic controller. And right now, this is all we see. Obviously, because it's a child of the controller, all we have is this event tick, and we have the event begin play. And the first thing we want to do is we want to give this controller the ability to accept or return a custom task ID. And there is a function, if you go under functions and override, called OV select task. OV stands for override. So what I've done is I've included a bunch of events or functions that you can override safely on your child, and they all start with OV. So if you start scrolling down here, notice that we have a few called OV started player interaction, OV ended player interaction. So you could safely override these functions, and these are dummy functions that are called when the player interaction starts and ends, and you can use that to add your own logic when these events happen to further customize the component. But in this case, we want to keep scrolling down and we're going to find OV select task. Notice that it's actually a function, and under return node we have task index. So if we do nothing, it's going to grab the task index from the parent and pass it right along. So in this case, we actually want to disconnect the parent. We don't need this. We're going to wire this directly. And right now, if we do nothing, this controller will always pass task index 0. That means that it will be on index 0 on repeat. So what we want to do here is let's just create a variable that we can later call, and let's just click on promote variable, and we can call this assigned task. And I'm keeping the same name just for completeness, but you can give it whatever name you want. So what's happening here is every time a new task comes, the NPC will come here, will call this function, and it will receive the value of assigned task, and that is the task that it's going to play. So what's going to happen now is that if we can change this value either through this blueprint or any other blueprint, then the NPC will then execute that task. Very, very simple. All right. And now we can go to the event graph here, and we want to create our custom task that will be called. And again, we have a custom task event that we want to override. So go to functions, override, and let's look for a function or an event called OV custom task. So scroll down here, and you can see it right here, OV custom task. Notice that it returns an index, and that is the same index that you see here on the profile. See, custom task index 0, and that is what's going to be returned here. So that means that we have more than one custom task. You can return the index here, and then you can write your own logic to do whatever you want it to do based on the index. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to copy this code from the final blueprint, and I'm just going to paste it here. And I'll explain what we're doing here. This is very good practice, so I would suggest that you always start your custom task with this logic here. The first thing we want to do when a custom task is called is that we want to interrupt the NPC state. We want to set the NPC state to interrupt, and that is if we want to directly control what's happening to the NPC. If we go to the AI, for example, here, and we open the behavior tree for our NPC, you notice that the root service here is returning the state. And based on the state, the NPC can be traveling, roaming, following a path, etc. But notice what happens if we have the state as the interrupt. It basically puts the behavior tree on idle. It's basically just waiting here. And the reason we're doing that is because we want to take control of the NPC. So by making this an interrupt, by setting this as interrupt, we're basically removing the behavior tree from the equation, and we are going to be the ones that are going to dictate that logic. And then we are doing a switch on int based on the index of the task. And right now it's only going to be task 0, but if we had more than one, you can go ahead and add as many pins as you wanted to this. Go back here. So right now we're only going to have index 0, which is fine, but in the case of more, then you can add them right here. All right, so let's quickly review what we want to do. We want the NPC to switch to the new task, which is going to be a custom task, and we want the NPC then to walk inside the cave and come here in front of this door. And I've already conveniently added a BP location actor. So we can use this actor, which is going to be invisible, and we can tell the NPC the first thing we want you to do when you start this custom task is we want you to come to this location right here. And it's called location actor. So what we can do here is we go to our custom controller, is we can create a new event, custom event, add custom event, and we can just call it event go to location. You can call it whatever you want, and we can call it from here, event go to location. And what is going to happen with event go to location is we're literally just going to tell the NPC to go to that actor. So we can use the node AI move to right here. And this is the exact same node that I use in my behavior tree to move the NPC. So this is going to use the navigation mesh to move the NPC to a location. But we need to give this node the pawn, and that is going to be the owner. So if you right click and you say get owner, notice that there is already a variable on the parent called owner, and that is already a character. See, class character. So we can use this and plug it right here. So we are going to be moving the owner of this component, and we want to give it a target actor, and that target actor is going to be this location actor. So what we can do is we can simply right click, promote to variable, and let's call this location actor. And we can create a new category, and let's just call it custom. So we have a new category that's going to appear, and we are going to make this editable. So we click on the little I here, and that means that we can select it directly in the level. So we're going to select the location actor, and let's do nothing. Let's just leave it like that for now, and let's make sure that it works. So there's one more thing before we continue our logic here is we need to have a way to tell the NPC to switch from its current task, index 0, to task 1. So we're going to use this blueprint here to connect to this NPC and change the assigned task from 0, which is the default, to 1, so then the task changes. So let's go ahead and open this blueprint here. And here's what's happening. On overlap, we check that the actor is the player by using the tag. We check if the NPC is valid, and if it is, we grab the controller and we set it to controller. And then we do a sequence. We open the door and we change the task. An open door is very simple. It's simply a timeline that moves the actor from its original location to a final location. But then the event change task is empty. We're going to actually add the code there. So the first thing we'll do before we do anything else is we want to change the class for the component, because this was originally on the final. You can see there at the end, controller CL final. We want to change this to controller, NPC controller, custom logic. That is the one that we just created. And if we click compile, you'll see that we have an error here because this class is different. We want to do the same thing. NPC controller, custom logic. We do want to change the variable type. And we disconnect here, compile, and now we can go ahead and, we can go ahead and connect it here. And now we have the correct controller. So what's going to happen is we check the player, we make sure that the NPC is valid, then we grab the NPC controller custom logic and set it to this, and then we're going to call the event change task. And the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that the NPC controller is valid. Make sure that it is valid. Always a good idea to do that. Okay. And then we can do this. And this is what I've done already on another blueprint, but we can check exactly how I did it. It's a good practice. On the showcase level, I have a blueprint called change task. And here's what I'm doing. I am changing the assigned task to the correct value, and I'm forcing the controller to go to the next task. That is basically so we don't have to wait for that task to end because there's a timer. So we can basically use the exact same logic here. So we can go back and we can say, all right, we're going to grab the NPC controller and we are going to set the assigned task right here to index 1. That is basically the second task. And then we want to grab the NPC controller, and just like here, we want to call the event next task. We're just going to force it. Compile and save. So now, when we overlap, we open the door, we grab the NPC controller, we change the assigned task which we just created, and we purposely call the next task because we don't want to wait for that timer to end. And remember, the assigned task was created here. Whoops, not here, here. And it's going to be returned to the NPC controller. All right, so if we click play, let's see what happens here. We have Bob roaming around. Oh, before we do that, sorry, we do need to assign the values here. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So the NPC is going to be this guy right here. Make sure that you have the reference and the door. And if we actually click on Bob here and we click on the NPC controller, notice that we have a new section called custom, and we do need to have the reference to the location actor. So we can click on the eyedropper, click this guy here, and that way, if we have that, when this runs, right, it'll call this, it'll interrupt, it'll say it's index 0, and then it'll move the AI to the location of the actor here. All right, so let's click play. Let's make sure that Bob is roaming. Let's step on here Notice now that we changed the task index for Bob to number 1. We open the door and now Bob is moving to the location actor. And he arrived and he's done. Obviously, there's nothing else. We're going to add the extra logic now. But notice that the task time is continuing and the task index is 1. Awesome. So we have kind of the skeleton of everything that we want. Now we want to add the additional logic of Bob arriving here, checking the player distance, and if the player is close enough, because we want to make sure that the player sees that, Bob is going to open the door. So cool. So we can close the change task blueprint here. We can close this here. We can even close this here. And we want to add additional logic here. So what we want to do is, on success, meaning when Bob finally arrives at the location, we want him to call another event that's going to constantly check for the player distance. So we can just create a new event here, custom event, and we can call it whatever, but I'll call it event check for player. And I'm keeping the exact same names that I had on the other function for clarity. And we can just call it right here, event check for player. Make sure you select the correct one here. And then what we want to do here is we want to grab the player. We want to create a reference to the player, and then we want to check the distance, right? So the first thing we'll do is we want to grab a reference to the player. And there is a very easy way to do that. We can use the NPC manager blueprint in the level to get the player. So if we type get NPC manager, we're going to get a reference to the NPC manager that we have in the level, and the NPC manager actually holds a reference to all of the players. This also works in multiplayer. So we can do is we can drag and say get player, and notice that we have a bunch of things. Player list, player names, player IDs. We'll just use player list. And this is going to be a list of all of the players. We just want the first player. So we can do get copy of index 0 of this array. We're only doing this in single player, so we only have one player. Grab the player list, give me the first player in that list. And we can now right click here and we can promote this to the variable, and we can just call this found player. I didn't call it player because there's another variable that is already called player, and it won't let you do that. So now we have the reference to the player, and now we can check the distance between the NPC and the player. And again, the way we check the distance is very simple. We can say get owner. We used this before. And we can use found player. And we can simply drag from here and they get distance. And Unreal has very nice functions already defined for us. And I used horizontal distance, so I'll use it here. Get horizontal distance to from target to another actor. Horizontal distance, that way it doesn't really matter the verticality, I guess. And we're going to simply say, hey, give me the distance between the owner and the player. And this is what we're going to do. But what happens is we want to check this distance constantly. We don't want to check it once, because if the player is far away, it checks the distance, the player is far away, and it's done. So what we actually want to do is we want to create a separate event that is going to have a timer that will then check the distance on a timer. So let's create another event. Oops, custom event, and let's call it event check distance. And this is the one that is actually going to check the distance on a timer. So we can call it from here, event check distance, which is this event right here. And it's good practice to make sure that the player is valid, that we actually found the player. You don't really have to do that, but I like to make sure that things are a little more secure. So if for whatever reason the NPC manager doesn't have the player at all, and this is null, you will not check the distance because the player doesn't exist, And if you wanted to, you could have like a little print string with a little error here. But regardless, we're going to call this event here, and we actually want to create a timer. So set timer by event. We can use the same event. We're going to make it looping, and we can say something like every half a second, we want to check the player distance. You can do it every second, every 0.2 seconds, whatever it is. Every half a second is good enough. And then we want to do this. We want to do a branch. And we want to say, hey, is the horizontal distance between the owner and the player less than or equal? In other words, is it within a certain range? And that range is a value. And we can make this a variable so we can play around with it. And we can make this variable, and let's call it player distance. And we'll push this under custom, and we'll make this public. That way we can change the value. And a value that I found that is pretty good is about 500 units, but you can make this value anything you want. So now what we're doing is we're saying, okay, we want the NPC to go to the location of the location actor. Once it arrives, check for the player, and we're going to grab the player from the NPC manager. And if it is valid, we're going to call another event called check distance, which is going to call a timer every half a second, and it's going to check the distance that the player and the owner are within less than or equal to this default distance, which is 500. And if that is true, we actually want to open the door. So how do we want to do that? Basically, what we want to do is we want to call an event, and we can call the event open door to keep things modular. Event open door. And this event is actually going to get a reference to the door, which is going to be basically this actor here, and it's going to move it down. And we're going to basically borrow the same code that I'm using here to move this door, because why wouldn't we do it, right? So if we open here, you see that we have this code right here. We can just literally just copy this logic. I already provided it there, so why not? And we can come here and we can paste it. And notice that we cannot add a timer, right? On a regular actor blueprint, we can have a timer, but components are not allowed to have a timer. So unfortunately, we cannot simply lerp nicely between, by using a timer. So we'll have to use something else. And in this case, we can use tick, or we can use another timer. So I'm just going to go ahead and use tick for now. So click on door and create a variable. And let's make this, we're going to put it under custom, because we want to make sure that we select it in the level, and we're going to make it public. Door location, we're going to create a variable. We don't need to expose this. And then finally, final door location, we're going to create this variable, but we also want to put it under custom, because this is another value that we have to give it. And now when we do that, notice that we still have a few things that we need to do. So what I want to do is I want to grab the original door's location when you call this event open door. So let's just add it here, event open door. So on a timer, every half a second, you're going to check the distance, and if the distance is less than or equal to this, go ahead and open the door. And the first thing we'll do is we'll open the door, and we'll grab the door location. And we want now to move the door down the same. But we need something like tick, for example, to move the door down smoothly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come all the way up here, and I'm going to grab this tick, and I'm just going to drag it down here. And I want this to drive this. However, I don't want because this is tick, I don't want the door to immediately start moving down as soon as we start the game. So we need to gate this somehow with a Boolean. And we can call this Boolean move door or whatever. But in this case, I'll just call it move door. And when we compile, we want to make sure that this is false by default. So when game starts, event tick is going to start ticking, and this is going to be blocking the moving of the door. Which means that when the door actually opens, we want to make this true. In other words, turning on the moving of the door on tick. Hopefully that is easy to understand why I did that. Now we need to lerp from the door location to the final door location, and we need an alpha. And the alpha is typically between 0 and 1. So we want to drag here and type clamp, and we want to clamp the float between 0 and 1. We don't really need to do that, but it's just a nice way of doing it. We don't want additional values here, negative values. And we want to now have the value here be an alpha. And we can create a variable, and we can literally just call this alpha. Great. Now we need a way to increase this alpha as time goes by. So what we can do is we can grab alpha, we can set the value, and we can say, hey, alpha is going to be alpha plus a value. So obviously we're accumulating the value of alpha every frame. And what we can do is, since we're using tick, we can use the delta seconds value to then increase the alpha by that value. So if we right click and say get world delta seconds, this is going to give us basically the delta time between frames. And this is going to make the movement fairly smooth. It's not completely smooth, but fairly smooth no matter your frame rate. And what we're doing now here is saying on tick, once move door is true, we want to set the actor location. We're going to lerp it from its original location to its final location based on the alpha. And the alpha itself is the previous alpha plus delta seconds. And the last thing we want to do is once this reaches 1, and we don't really need to do that because this is why we have the clamp, but let's just do it anyway. We want to add a branch, and we want to say, hey, if alpha is bigger or equal to 1, because we're continuously increasing it, we want to stop moving the door. We're done. So we can then make this false to stop the movement of the actor. So we can grab this and we can duplicate it here, but we can make it false, effectively closing or gating off this part of the code on tick. All right, that's pretty much it. So even though I'm going fairly slow, the logic, hopefully you can see that the logic is still fairly simple. So let's just quickly review here. Sorry, not here. Oops, this is what I'm looking for. We're going to call a custom task. We interrupt the NPC. The task index is going to be 0. So we go to a location. We move the NPC to the location. When the NPC arrives at the location, success is fired, and we start to check for the player. We grab the player's location. Sorry, we grab the player's reference. We make sure it's valid. And only then we start checking the distance. And we're going to use a timer every half a second looping. And we're going to grab the distance between the NPC and the player. And we're going to check if the distance is less than or equal to this value, in this case 500, we want to call an event called open door. And this event, all this event is going to do is grab the current location of the door, which is going to be that actor, set it to this variable, and set move door to true. And because we're ticking constantly and checking move door, once this becomes true, we're immediately going to come here and we're going to start moving the door from its original location to its final location, lerping by using this alpha, which we are then increasing because 0 means that we're going to go from the original all the way to 1 to the final, increasing it by world delta seconds, and then we're going to check and say, hey, once the alpha is 1 or above, stop making the calculation. And now if we go back here and we click on our NPC and we click on our controller, notice that we have under custom a few additional things. We have the location actor already set up here. We have our player distance, which we can change. We'll leave it at 500. We need to give it the reference to the door, which is going to be this actor here. And finally, we need to give it a final door location. And there's a very easy way of doing that. We grab this guy here and we simply move it. You can see the location here. And if I just grab this guy and move it down all the way down here, I can come to location, right click, copy, and then we can drag this guy up again, oops, to its original location in the level. Something like here. Yep. And now we can go back to the NPC, click on the controller, and we can right click under final door location, and we can paste that vector 3 information, and we can now click on save all. And let's click play. And we can see that Bob again is just roaming and task index 0 is playing. We are going to now step over and reveal our secret door. And we can see that Bob is now executing task 1 because we explicitly told him to execute that task. So we're controlling the order specifically. And now Bob is going to arrive at the location of the actor. And he is now, or should be now, running a timer and checking the distance. And when we get close, Bob opens the door. And now we have access to our little token here. And there's one last thing that I did, and might as well just add it here, is that Bob is just going to stay there forever. Bob is no longer needed. So why don't we just have Bob graciously disappear? So after we finish here and we say, hey, we're done, we don't need to move the door anymore, we can simply add a little delay. Give it 2 seconds. That's what I gave it last time. And then we're going to destroy the actor. And we can get the owner, which we already had before, and we can say destroy actor. Okay? And let's do one final test. I think we're good to go here, but let's make sure that he's roaming. We're going to step on our little trigger. We reveal the secret door. And now we have Bob, our NPC, go to the specific location. He's going to wait for us. You can see that we can be around here and he's going to be patiently waiting for us. We get there. He opens the door. He disappears after 2 seconds. We come here. We discover our secret treasure. We get our little coin and we are done. All right, guys. So this is it. Hopefully this was not hard to follow. Like I said, this is a more advanced topic, so you do need to understand the basics of the NPC manager. And obviously, when you're writing your own logic, you need to understand how to use blueprints and exactly what you want to do. But this was a fun little example that I figured is probably a better use case because it includes actual gameplay. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to include this level in the 1.1 update because I already have it all set up with everything already done. So if you're watching this after the 1.1 update, or maybe you couldn't follow along, or you're having issues, don't worry. When the update comes in a couple of weeks, you are going to have this level. You can just open it and you can open all of these blueprints and see exactly what I did. And this is a much better example to show you how you would add your own custom logic to create customized gameplay for your game. So that is pretty much it, guys. I really hope that you enjoyed the tutorial. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. As always, I have my email here. You can email me directly if you have questions. I'm pretty active in our Discord, so there's going to be a link to the Discord below. Join our Discord, come talk to us. The community is pretty active. And DM me via Discord if you're having any issues whatsoever, if you have any questions. All right. Thank you guys so much for your support. And I'll talk to you in the next video.